So what we've tried to do this morning is to really emphasize the importance of fully investing in children's education, in a high-quality education, and in particular, investing in the development of students of color. One of the things I hope has become clear, I'm sure is clear to you already, is that our continued failure to do that in an adequate fashion rapidly propels us towards a situation where we are in effect creating two Americas, or solidifying the creation of two Americas, and the degree to which we can reverse that trend, I think, offers good things for us for the future. What I'd like to do now is begin a question and answer session. And first, I'd like to ask our panelists to switch on their microphones. Thank you. And as the moderator, I'd like to take the liberty to throw out the very first question to kind of get us going for a moment. And the question I'd like to ask the panelists to respond to is, could each of you talk a little bit about the potential impact on our national economy, as well as the potential impact on our democracy of not getting it right, of not adequately focusing on high school reform and not reauthorizing NCLB in 2008 with strong accountability and a strong focus on high schools.
Mm-hmm. How would you like to start? You want me to begin?
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Michael. It's a great question. I want to pick up in answering it on Bethany's last observation. You know, when you look at high schools today, and you identify the problem high schools, and you see the racial disparity that exists in terms of problem schools and the students who are not graduating, and I think her emphasis on that was really quite well done, it becomes very clear that we are indeed producing, another generation of students who have failed and we have failed to incorporate into the broader body politic. Now, it has two sets of implications, and I think you identified them. First, from a competitive standpoint, it has dire implications. The workforce of the next 25 years is largely going to be drawn from the population of students who are getting the least access to high-quality education. So the growth in the workforce is being dominated by Latino, African American, and immigrant populations. Certainly those who are already here will contribute as well, and that is the majority white population will contribute as well, but the growth of the workforce will be taken from these communities. Secondly, every indication that our country has fallen behind in maintaining a competitive balance with the rest of the world is being underscored on an annual basis. I mean, the reports about our current posture with respect to math, which you identified, we're 24th in the world. When we look at the countries that are generating the largest numbers of students interested in engineering, in science, and in teaching, they're drawn from China, they're drawn from India, they're drawn from Malaysia, they are drawn from parts of the world that recognize and value the preparation and training of students to compete at that level. We don't. And so the combination of those forces, it seems to me, are quite dire. The Educational Testing Service has produced recently a report, which I think is very interesting. It's called America's Perfect Storm, and then it has a subtitle which talks about the unique combination of factors that, at the end of the day, will spell real difficulty for the U.S. economy, and it talks about some of the things I just mentioned. Your second question about democracy, I think, is really perhaps even as important as the first is, perhaps the more important. You know, our country has done something that very few other countries in the world have done. They've taken an extraordinarily diverse population, and they've managed to meld that population around a core set of democratic values. And while we obviously all respect the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and so forth, the truth is that we have a group of Americans drawn from all populations in the world, and we've managed to make that a cohesive polity. You look at other parts of the world that have not managed diversity as well, whether it's Northern Ireland, whether it's the former Yugoslavia, whether it's Rwanda, whether it's the Middle East. I could go on and identify places where Diversity is the new challenge of the day, just as the Cold War was the challenge of the last generation. If we're going to be able to maintain that commitment to democratic values, it requires a level of fundamental educational opportunity and attainment. You can't possibly expect to perpetuate an integrated society committed to democratic values when you're creating a new caste system of employees who will be largely drawn from the Black and Latino population. We are about to institutionalize an educational caste system that will ultimately divide us rather than unite us. I think this stuff has dire implications. And my last point is this. I'm always fascinated at forums like this. I think the information that Bethany and Peter have presented really is, as she called it, an alarm that needs to be recognized. There's a level of complacency in Washington about our inattention to these issues, which is stultifying in terms of really bringing about change. And until there is a recognition that the urgency of the moment has to be seized upon and has to be fully addressed, we're not going to be able to break through that and make progress. And that's why I think her last point, which is, look, don't lose this opportunity. The issue is on the table. There's too much at stake if you fail to reauthorize the act.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Peter?
I would maybe lead by noting that I think that the organizations that have been most engaged in supporting changes to the law and supporting moving the process forward have been, I think, as I mentioned, organizations representing students with disabilities, organizations representing communities of color and civil rights organizations, organizations concerned with equity in education, but also the business groups have dedicated unprecedented levels of resources to advocacy and support of standards-based accountability. I don't think that they're doing that. I mean, they're doing that out of economic self-interest, because what business groups are telling us is that they're not getting the workers who are trained to serve in the workforce in the 21st century. I do think, sort of picking up a little bit on Wade's point, that as we see larger proportions of minority students in U.S. schools, that this is no longer a problem that should just concern the organizations as a part of that are part of the campaign. This is an American problem, and currently 1 out of 5 U.S. public schools is Latino. It's the largest and fastest growing minority group in American schools. So it's not a Latino problem anymore. It's an American problem. And I would just conclude by saying that our purpose here in support of education reform is to develop structures that support the students rather than supporting a system that's not that's failing many of our students.